We'll go ahead and get started then. Good evening, I'm John Flansburgh. I'm the Regional Infrastructure Administrator for the City of Reno. We're here tonight to discuss proposed sewer user rate increases to our fees needed for our sewer infrastructure. So I wanted to just start out that the purpose of this is to make sure we have public engagement. There's been a lot of thought that this rate increase is already a foregone conclusion. The rate increase is a recommendation from our consultant, and it is the reason for us going out and getting public information is to make sure that we're hearing from our public. We're committed in the City of Reno to getting public engagement, and we are better problem solvers when we include everyone. And so appreciate your involvement tonight. We have received about 250 responses to the survey that has gone out. In addition to that, we wanted to hold the meeting tonight so that we had an opportunity to share information, to receive questions from the public, and to share the questions we've already received in the feedback that's come in, and to make sure that we had this in adequate time so that people could continue to put their questions or their feedback into the survey before public comment closes on June 30th. So I want to just let everyone know about that. All right, so why are we here? So we're here every 2 years. The City of Reno performs a rate sufficiency analysis on the user fees to make sure that we have enough money coming in to cover the expenses planned. And that we look at revenues coming in and expenses going out, both for operations and maintenance. We look at our 20-year capital improvement program. Capital improvement program are the construction projects we anticipate coming up in the next 20 years to ensure that our infrastructure is adequate and can continue to serve the use that it has of conveying the sewer to the treatment plants and then treating that sewer. Our directors got together we have various directors, maintenance and operations, utility services, and public works, get together to discuss the model, make sure that the projects we needed were in there. We actually ended up, when the first initial model came in, we actually looked and made some reductions. And even with those reductions, the recommended rate increase came back at 8% for 2 consecutive years. Again, as I mentioned, we have just over 250 public comments that we've received in regards to the proposed rate increase, and several questions that have come out of that. And I'm going to address some of those frequently asked questions in our presentation tonight. City of Reno sewer infrastructure. We have 842 miles of sewer lines and 21 miles of force mains. What is that? It's kind of hard to picture what that would look like. If you were to drive from Reno to Vancouver, British Columbia, that would be the number of miles of sewer line that we have. So think about that. On every mile of line, there's a sewer line. Look at that center line. That center line, we have a sewer line all the way from Reno to Vancouver, British Columbia, if you were to drive that. 21 miles of force mains. Force mains are just pipes that are under pressure. So think of your water lines that are under pressure to get the water to your homes. We have areas where the gravity sewer lines are in a low spot and they have to be pumped up to a distance so that they can then continue to gravity flow. We have 21 miles of those. Of course, the manholes. Lift stations, again, are those locations where it's at a low point. We have to lift the sewage that comes in to put it under pressure to get it to a spot where it can then gravity flow. And then our 2 main water reclamation facilities. I thought one other interesting statistic, we currently flow about 25 million gallons a day of sewage total. What would that look like? If you took a football field from the back of the end zone to the other back of end zone, and the sidelines to sidelines, and you filled it up to the bottom of a goalpost 10 feet high, so the bottom of the goalpost on a football field, we would fill up 6 of those. That's how much volume of sewage is created in the City of Reno that is treated. And so just kind of put that into a little bit of perspective. The City of Reno is the oldest community obviously in the region. nearly in the state. And the amount of sewer infrastructure that we have, people often talk about the cost of our sewer infrastructure. Because we have some of the oldest infrastructure in the state, we've had to replace some of that. What we've experienced back in 2011, when we had a rate increase going in place, is something that Sparks is now starting to experience. And they're looking at rate increases also because of the need to replace that infrastructure. It really is tied more to the age of your infrastructure, how long it's been out there, and then timing of when it needs to be replaced. 55% of Washoe County population is in the city of Reno. So we have the largest amount of population overall. What are we here talking about tonight? We're here to talk about the sewer user fee. That's the fee that's paid quarterly by all of our utility customers, residents, businesses, commercial. It pays for maintenance and rehabilitation of our sewer infrastructure, the operations, and the treatment costs. We are not talking about the sewer connection fees. Those are the one-time fees paid by developers, and that is pays for the capacity growth projects. So if we have, so developers, when they come in and say they're doing a subdivision, they're going to build out all the infrastructure needed for the sewer lines and stuff going out into the subdivision and pay the hookup fees, which is the fees of paying for what it's costing for the additional sewage going into the wastewater treatment plant. And that's a connection fee. That is paying for growth. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. But tonight we're talking mostly about the sewer user fee. For the sewer user fees, it pays for, again, the operations of existing sewer infrastructure, to maintain it, to replace it. And what does that look like? Well, in the upper left-hand corner of this slide is the inside of one of those, what we call a nitrification tower, which is in the bottom left of this slide. So the bottom left, we had to rehab the first one of those. They were built in the mid-80s. We rehabbed the first one a couple years ago. That meant taking everything out of the center and rebuilding it up. If you look on the outside of the infrastructure, you'll notice those little ribs going all the way around. If you've ever looked at a bridge from the bottom and you've seen the big concrete trusses that come in, what you're seeing in those ribs is the bottom of the truss, like unto a bridge, that are all laid up on their end into a circle and then bound around to hold the pressure of all the water that's inside and all the media that's inside that performs a function for the nitrification. Just to give you an idea of scale. Of course, it's all of our pipelines, pumps, lift stations, other processes at the wastewater treatment plant. Growth does pay for growth. And I know that there's a lot of discussion about this, and I think it's healthy for us to have a conversation about it. Again, those connection fees are paid by developers for all the new connections that come in. We don't always have time to wait for the growth to occur before we provide the expansion projects. So sometimes we bond for those projects so we can build expansions to the wastewater treatment plant in advance. And so you bond for those projects, and then as those fees come in, they help pay off the debt service for those projects. There's a whole separate, there's a sewer fund, but it is divided between the user fees that come in and what those pay for, and the connection fees and what those pay for. The background picture on this slide is a picture of the ballpark apartments. And I thought it was interesting to bring this one up because there's something called sewer connection fee credits. And so there's a lot of discussion about, well, what is that doing? Am I subsidizing development from these sewer connection fee credits? On this block, when I first came to the city of Reno, there was a hotel called the Mizpah. The Mizpah was on the corner, and the Mizpah had several stories and several rooms within it, and they were rented out as extended stay or apartments, like unto apartments. They had some commercial on the bottom. The developer, or the owner of the Mizpah, had all the different bathrooms that were involved in the hotel, facilities for washing clothes, laundry. They had restaurants. So they had all the different fixture, what we call fixture units. And so there was a fee that the owner paid for those fixture units when it was developed. It sat vacant after there was a fire in the Mizpah, and it sat vacant for several years. And then when the ballpark was built and the developer purchased this property, they used the connection fee credits, meaning the amount of fixture units that had been purchased previously. They used those number of fixture units to offset the new development that was built. So when this new ballpark apartment was built, there were a certain amount of credits that went to offset their sewer connection fee for the new connection fee. And that's what it's meant by a sewer connection fee credit. It's fixture units purchased previously that then were credited against the new project when they built something else. So the sewer rate increase, why the need for an increase and why now? We have been, in 2011, before that, even in 2005, there was a rate increase that had been put into place. And then in 2011, it was increased and extended. And the last true rate increase that was set into place to get us to that tier took place in October 1st, 2015. Now, ever since 2015, there have been increases. Those have been related to consumer price index. The reason for the inflationary CPI increases is just to keep our buying power, our buying power doesn't erode. So we can keep up with that inflation through time, and it's worked for 10 years. But there's been some major changes that have upset that balance that we have between the revenues coming in and the expenses that come out. Part of those is increase in construction costs, and we'll kind of show those here in a minute, what that looks like compared to the increases in the rate. Part of it is increased chemical, specifically bleach, which we use for disinfection at the wastewater treatment plant, our electricity costs and insurance costs. Those have gone up 54%. And then our 20-year repair replacement capital improvement program is nearly $1 billion. And those costs have increased because, again, of those increased construction costs. And that's what's weighing on the need for a sewer rate increase. This graph depicts that in 2019, if you looked at the gold bars are the increases in the sewer user fees cumulative since 2019. So cumulatively, since that period of time, they've gone up 20.1%. That's a lot. It's a lot because we have had pretty low inflation up until 2021, 2022, 23. And so there were some outsized inflationary years that bumped that up. But look what happened to the construction cost increase beginning in 2020 to 2021 and 2022. During COVID, we saw some major increases in our construction costs, general construction costs that occurred. And they've leveled out now, but it's like they were reset at this higher level. And those have increased over 42% or 41.4%. So what does this look like? When we run our analysis for the projects and we look at, in this case, this is a 10-year outlook. We have the 20 years of capital improvement program and our operations and stuff, our best guess. But when we look at just the next 10 years, based on what revenues we have coming in and the expenses we have, we end up going negative in 2028. And so what do we do about that? Well, we had already looked at something like unto this and we made some reductions, but we came back and we still had this situation. So this is if we did nothing else and didn't have a rate increase and just had the inflationary increases that we show, this is what our fund would look like in the next 10 years. And why is that? And we're going to kind of jump into that a little bit more. And what happens if we do nothing? So, I mean, there are some major consequences to not doing anything. We could have, again, our infrastructure continues to age. We would have pipelines that once in a while we'll have a sewer line that collapses and sewer will start to back up. And then we have to go in and repair. Sometimes it's just a point source repair. Sometimes it's a longer repair that has to be made. And so having that and having sewage spills, that occurs. Have you ever seen where someone goes in and they redo a street and then they come back in afterwards and they start cutting it back up because they've got utilities because water or something else has occurred? That could also occur if we had a failure in our sewer line in a street that had only been paved for, 1 to 5 years. We don't want to have to go back and do those. So we coordinate all of our street projects, not just up the cities, but also the Regional Transportation Commission street projects with our sewer projects. And this is the fund that helps us to make sure that we're keeping on top of the sewer infrastructure underneath all of our streets. And then, of course, we run a risk at our treatment plants of having a failure. Our infrastructure is old. The treatment plants were built in the mid-60s. We've had major upgrades in the mid-80s. We've had additional ones in the mid-2000s. And then we've had some more modest improvements in the last 10, 12 years. So what does that look like? It just is a situation where we can't, failure is not an option. We talk about that a lot at treatment plants. We can't not treat the sewage even while we're building new infrastructure to handle the new sewage coming in. So some of the large projects we have in the next several years at Tumworth that relate directly to the user fee is filter process upgrades. One of the major things that we do at the wastewater treatment plant is we have a filter. We filter and disinfect. It's one of the last stages that we go through. That hasn't been, nothing's occurred with the filter system since the mid-80s. We try to schedule one of our aeration basins to complete every other year. And so we have one scheduled for 2025 and one for 2027. And some of those have a little bit different, depending on how much degradation is going on, what has to occur. Those are basins that are full and running all the time. We have enough redundancy, we can take one out so we can do a repair or a rehabilitation and then put it back in service. The big project that we have is a new dewatering facility. Now, the dewatering facility is when the sewage comes into the wastewater treatment plant, the first thing that kind of happens in the first stage is that you're trying to separate the solids that are within the wastewater from the water. And like 96-7% of the overall sewage is water. And so you're trying to separate that out so you can treat it. The solids that come out of that go through a different process, through a digestion process, kind of like your stomach digesting food. And we take the gas that comes off of that and condition the gas, and we use that to make electricity at the plant. And we supply about 1/3 of our power needs at the plant using these gases that come off of our sewage. But the dewatering facility is what takes that final product and squeezes any remaining water in it, and we have the sludge that's left over, and that goes off to the landfill. Well, we do not have any redundancy right now. We have 2 centrifuges that are running, that are spinning, that are pulling the water out of that sludge, and we do not have any backup for that system right now. And not only that, but there's no room in the existing building to add on to it. And the existing building, we had a seismic study done on it, and it will not perform well in a large earthquake. And so for all those various reasons, we have a new dewatering facility planned at wastewater treatment plant. The 45 million that's shown here is the amount that would go against the user fee side, because it is the portion that is replacing what's existing. There's another 15-20 million that would come out of the connection fee side, because it is going to plan for new expansion of the dewatering facility. We have a couple other projects shown here. In the next 5 years at Riswharf, we have a few improvements as we are showing up here. The largest one is the Advanced Purified Water Project. This is the portion of the project that is looked to be paid for out of user fees, because we're taking the existing flows and processing that to reduce the amount of outflow we have going to Swan Lake. We have some modest improvements at the wastewater treatment plant. We just underwent a major upgrade up there to double the size of that plant. We also have a need to develop a corp yard, a new corporate yard in the North Valleys, so we don't have to spend as much time with equipment and manpower going up to North Valleys to do the maintenance. We could have a separate yard up there. We're growing large enough now that it makes sense that we would have another facility up there for the maintenance. And then in our collection system, we have almost $70 million over the next 5 years in rehabilitation of our sewer lines. One of the biggest things that we're always tackling is the amount of water that gets into the system that we don't want to. Of course, we never want the sewage to get out of the pipes. We want it to stay in the pipes, go to the plant and be treated, but we also don't want to treat excess water. So there's a program we call inflow and infiltration to reduce excess water coming to the plant because we don't want to treat anything more than we need to. And so we have a program for that. It's not just pipes, but it's also manholes. The hydrogen sulfide gases are pretty damaging to the sewer manholes over time. Those gases actually eat away and soften the concrete. And so we have rehab projects need to happen there. And then we do have some modest stormwater projects. And we have one of our, what is referred to as a high hazard dam, but it's a dam used for stormwater events that was built in the 50s, 60s, and is in need of some rehabilitation work. And so that project is also slated in that line. So what has happened with our user rates over time? Sure, in October 1st, 2011, which is referred to as fiscal year 12, it was just shy of $100. In the way that the rate increase is shown right now, October 1st of 2006, that the last one proposed, would double it. It would take it to just over $200. And so that's a doubling of the fee over 15 years. We recognize that that's not inconsequential. But if you think about what things have cost, that's kind of how things have grown in other parts of life. And I don't know, I don't have a great answer for how we can change some of those, you know, how we reduce rates overall and still maintain our sewer system. But we want to have that discussion. So as of October 1st, each year our rates go into effect, and currently they increase by consumer price index. So currently our rates for single family home is $177.24. For multifamily, it's $145.80. In October 1st, with doing nothing with the rate increase, it will go up to $181.62. So what we're asking for is on that 8% is it's kind of like a +5 on top of that current CPI. And so that would take it up to the $191.22. And then if that were to be approved and we got to the October 1st of 2026 and went up 8% more, it would be at the $206.34. So that just gives you an idea what the magnitude of those increases are. Of course, we understand affordability, and we wanted to look, what does that mean overall? What is the median household income in the city of Reno? And so when we looked at the 2023 data, the median household income in the city of Reno is $78,448. That means half are making less, half are making more. If you use that as your gauge, then the average single family home residents, you'd be paying about just right at 1% of your median household income. The standard in the industry says that sewer user rates, water and sewer together, should be no more than 4 to 4.5% of a household income. And in our region, because of how sewer is done compared to water, we look at that and say it's about 2 to 2.5% of your household income, and we're about 1%. That doesn't mean that it's any easier to pay the bill. We're just showing affordability, looking at those affordability standards. Well, there are people who make less than the median income. So what does that mean to their income? We look at that, 86% of the households in Reno pay less, 86% pay less than 2% because they're making more than about $25,000 or more a year. So that would be about 2%. But that means 14% are paying more than that 2% on their sewer bills. So we just wanted to kind of put that in context of what that means. And with that, we have a sewer rebate program. We want to rename that to be the Sewer Utility Assistance Program. Currently, the criteria to qualify for that is if you qualify for another program like an energy assistance program, then you would qualify. If you get Social Security disability income, you would qualify. If you have supplemental Social Security income, you qualify. And if you have a Veteran Administration disability, you qualify. We were looking at that and had met with the Senior Citizen Advisory Committee they had asked, could you add supplemental nutrition assistance program as another eligibility? Because some of the seniors that were talking about this and affordability issues were saying that they would qualify for that, but may not qualify for some of the others. So we wanted to add that as an additional criteria. And that's proposed. And so it would end up increasing the budget for this program to about $200,000 a year. And we would make that application period available all year long, where currently it's only available for 2 months out of the year. So those are the things that we have discussed in terms of some of the recommendations from the study and some of the conversations we've had prior to coming to the council. And again, looking at that 8% for 2 consecutive years. So what does that 2% for over 2 consecutive years do? Well, this is what that graph looks like for the next 10 years by doing an 8% plus 8. And that's where the recommendation ended up coming from. We have a large amount of money that we've had in the sewer fund because we knew we had some very large projects already queued up to go. But even with those large projects, and even though we had saved to be prepared for that, those outsized construction costs have caused our cash flow to reduce down to get into that, what we would refer to as 60 days of operating. And so that is the reason for the increase. So that concludes the presentation portion that we wanted to make. But I thought it would also be helpful if we talked about some of the frequently asked questions that have come in the 251 responses we've already received. So one of the questions that came, and these are trends. These are not every question. These are some of the trends that we're having receiving. So why is my sewer bill double my water bill? Well, in not every instance is somebody's sewer bill double the water bill, but it is more than the water bill. And why is that? We have a wonderful water resource in the Truckee River, and that's where primarily all of our water comes from. And it's a very high quality. And because of that, Truckee Meadows Water Authority is able to pull that water off. They're able to do some treatment. They're able to send it out to people's homes and get it to you. We're required to take the sewage that comes from all the homes and businesses and it goes to the wastewater treatment plant, especially in the Truckee Meadows plant. We're required to not only treat it to such a high standard, in fact, we're one of the most strict permits in the entire nation because of the water quality of the Truckee River. So we have to treat that water to a super high standard so we can actually put it back in the Truckee. And we're required to put it back in the Truckee because there are other water users downstream. The reason that our permit is so strict is because the Truckee River goes to a terminus lake in Pyramid Lake. And so when you have a terminus lake, there is nothing, the only thing that's going to happen to that water is it's going to go to the lake and whenever you have evaporation, if there's any salts or other things in that water, it's just going to make the concentration of that water body higher over time. And so that's why we have such strict standards for our permit and what we have to treat to at the wastewater treatment plant. Many places only have to do a primary and secondary treatment. We have what's called a tertiary, where we have to treat it to those higher standards to remove nitrogen, to remove phosphorus, to remove salts from the certain portion of salts. And as we grow, our limits of what we can discharge into the lake don't change. So we're given so many pounds. So as we grow, we continually have to get better and better at our processes. And that's part of what the growth comes from, is paying for projects that get us better and better at removing phosphorus, at removing nitrogen, at removing those salts so we continue to meet our permit. So that's why the sewer bill is, it doesn't surprise me at all that the sewer bill is more than the water bill because of those strict requirements that we have in doing the wastewater treatment. Why are larger homes charged the same as smaller homes? That's a great question. We have in the region in 2014, I had a consultant look at, can we charge sewer based on the amount of water usage? And that kind of goes to that next question in blue. And so could we base the rates on that? And, Washoe County, the city of Sparks and the city of Reno all charge by a flat rate and for residential. And we do charge City of Reno does charge businesses by water usage. The difficulty with residents is that your water usage changes over the year because of irrigating in the April through October or whatever time frame that would be. And so your water use would go up, but that's not going to the sewer. And so when you look at charging by water usage, you usually look at your wintertime water use. And you take, say, 3 or 4 months, December or January, February, March, and you look at your water use during those times, and you kind of average it for your water bill. When we did that, a couple things that we found out. One, there's a pretty large base charge that goes in that is just because the infrastructure that's in place, degrading over time, is there to serve all of the residents. And it isn't really based on water volume. That's the treatment side, what we're doing with treatment side. And so there's still a fairly large base amount, but there is some things that go with water usage. The other thing that was very interesting that I just learned more recently, which made more sense in why we charge a flat rate, have charged a flat rate, is that it was actually illegal, or there was a law against metering residential properties for water usage in Washoe County in the Truckee Meadows until the late 80s. And then that changed. And then there was the bill, you could not require people to use their water meter until the sale of a home. And then in 2009 or 10, the Truckee Meadows Water Authority Board changed that, and everybody was metered and everybody gets billed off a metered service. So why do I bring that up? I bring it up because maybe that's something that we can and should look at again. What if we can charge based off of water usage instead of just a flat rate? So we hear you. That's why we have the public feedback. And then the last question on this slide, why are you raising rates and increasing the assistance program? Again, it was, we're showing that as an option. Receiving feedback on that is good for us to have. We want to receive the feedback on do we want to increase the assistance program? And when we say increase assistance program, do we want to allow for additional criteria such as SNAP benefits to be eligible for that assistance program? Some other questions that we have. Regulations are being removed. Why can't rates stay steady? Well, that's interesting because there's a thought out there that regulations are being removed, but that's not what we're seeing, and that's not what we have seen. In fact, our permit at the Truckee Meadows Water Reclamation Facility hasn't been renewed since 2017, and we're waiting for that renewal to occur. We don't know if there'll be any additional requirements. We're trying to work that through the process. It goes through the Nevada Division of Environmental Protection, and they're overseen by Region 9 Environmental Protection Agency. So I know that there's a lot of discussion out there about regulations being removed, but that is not, we have not seen that as it relates to our discharge permit. And as I discussed earlier, there's some really good reasons why that permit is in place the way that it is. Upper right, are expansions into new developments fully covered by new owners, or do they result in additional cost burden on established customers? So again, when a developer builds a subdivision, a brand new subdivision, they expand all of the infrastructure for water, sewer, gas, power into those areas. And then the developer has to pay for all of that. They pay for the connection fees. And when the new owners come in, it's going to be part of the purchase price for that development. And so as it relates to sewer, that comes in, we have the new customers. At the same time, those new customers have brand new infrastructure. So we don't have to do a lot of maintenance. We still have to do the camera work and make sure make sure things are flowing right and that it's constructed well. But that infrastructure is good for quite a long time. We actually have more cost in the oldest infrastructure, only in that it's time to replace it. Those individuals have been paying in, whether it was the people who live there now or people who lived there previously, but they've been paying into the system for a long time. And when it comes time to replace their infrastructure, then we do that. And it does cost a lot of money. And that's some of that $70 million capital improvement program over the next 5 years that we showed. Why can't you just charge new customers more? Again, the sewer utility is, you know, once you're part of the sewer utility, then you're paying the rate, however those rates are established. In some aspects, they do pay more because they pay for those connection fees for the growth that needs to happen. But there isn't a mechanism that says we should charge this group more, this group less. Why am I paying for growth and new developments? Again, we charge a separate fee for that growth component for those new developments coming in. In fact, when we separated the connection fee last time, we set up 3 separate areas. So we have one fee for connections for the Truckee Meadows Central. We have one if you're in Verdi, because we had to build a large interceptor to go out to Verdi called the Lawton Verdi Interceptor. And so those flows coming in, there's a surcharge. They pay the Tumwater Central plus the additional cost of that debt service and other work that's going to need to occur for Verdi. And then we have a separate one for our Reno Stead plant. I think this is the last slide. Why isn't the city cutting spending of the fire department, public art, or other expensive administrative positions instead of raising fees? Again, the sewer enterprise fund is an enterprise fund. We receive the revenues that come into the fund. We pay the expenses from the sewage out of the fund. We don't have fire isn't part of the fund. Public art isn't part of the fund. Other administrative positions as it relates to things outside of the sewer are not part of the fund. And so that they're just separate. There's a separate general fund. There's a separate sewer enterprise fund. Why haven't you shopped around for other providers of supplies that have increased, such as bleach? We talked about the increased cost of chemicals. Bleach has gone up by over 300%. We actually do. So when we purchase at the wastewater treatment plant, in our purchasing, we go out and we try to join other contracts for, as you can imagine, we use a lot of bleach, way more than they use at the swimming pools. And so we do get good pricing. It's just that all the prices from all of the vendors has gone up. Why can't you raise rates more slowly over time? That's going to be a consideration. We're going to look at if, you know, when we talk to council and we give them the feedback from the public, we're going to look at what if we did it instead of 8 + 8, maybe it's 6 + 6 + 6 or 5, 4 5s, or I don't know. We'll have to run the model under different rate increases to get us to that so that we have enough revenues to cover the expenses. And if we don't quite get to the revenues to cover the expenses, we're going to have to see what are we going to give up in terms of timing of projects to meet the rate increase. And then why are Reno's rates higher than all the other jurisdictions? And I kind of covered that a little bit earlier. It's really, I think, in utility management and in my nearly 30 years of looking at rates, whether that's for gas tax, fuel tax, or sewer rates or those things, I think it's just when it's the asset of the sewer pipes and the pumps and things that we build, they're 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, and maybe more. I think that the replacement costs for those just aren't captured early enough. And I think that's why when we were in 2011, I think we were on a good plane and things were going really well right up until we saw those large outsized increases in the construction costs over the last few years. And that's really what's kind of thrown us off. We're really looking to try to reset those revenues to a spot that will meet where those expenses have gone. And again, we look at this every 2 years, so we can see kind of what those trends are looking like, what the projects are. So that's the presentation in terms of the why the increase, how the sewer utility fund works, some of the questions that we've received, and kind of answers to some of those questions. We want to make sure that we're here to answer those questions, and we want to make sure that you understand that we are here not in opposition. to one another. We're here to gather that information and to hear you out, hear the questions that have come in, and provide all that information to our council so we can deliberate and come up with solutions that will help us to continue to have a healthy, functioning utility that meets all the requirements that we need, and at the same time be able to meet our permit requirements, but also meet the needs of our public. And I'll turn the time over. Any questions from any of the public? Scott.
Yeah, here you can probably hear me fine.
But online it'd be good, yeah.
Okay, so here's my question. You talked a lot about the developer hookup fees covering expansion currently.
Mhm.
Prior to that, the city contracted with Far West Engineering to do a study in 2021, and that study showed that we were currently charging less than half in hookup fees that it would actually take to cover the expansion. In 2023, I believe in January, there's a motion in the council to adopt the Far West fee schedule, which included a doubling of connection fees, the regional tiers,
Right.
as well as 3 tiers for homes, micro, standard, and
Very large.
very large
Mhm.
housing. I believe standard
Right.
was defined as 2.5 bathroom, 4 bedroom, like a basic home, right? So that was in 2023. So we basically ran a 50% deficit between what we charged new construction and what it actually took to absorb that new construction between 2014 and 2023. I don't see the money coming from anywhere else. So I have to believe some of that is now coming out of the rate increases. My recommendation would be, if you need more money, expansion surcharge for a temporary amount of time to cover your construction projects, and then remove that. I would also recommend, just like you do for hookups, that you charge flat fees in a tiered level. Like I said, I am about to retire. I'm in an 1,150 square foot house with 1.5 bathroom. The neighbor on the right of me, Bernard's an 86-year-old retired school teacher. Neighbor on the left of me, Kathy, 72-year-old retired blackjack dealer. Same floor plan. We're paying the same amount as, a 6,000 square foot, 6-bedroom house in Collin Ranch. We're not using 1/10 the sewage. You talked about fixtures and fixture credits. Well, you don't need water metering. You can just base it off fixtures. I got 1.5 bathrooms. That house has 8 bathrooms. I mean, it's kind of a no-brainer there. Those are just some things that I would like you to consider.
No, I appreciate the feedback. I'm going to address the connection fee discussion. So obviously it wasn't from 2014 until 2023 that it was only half the price. Obviously those costs had gone up over time. When we establish a fee for new connections, we look at the existing capacity remaining at the wastewater treatment plant for the permit that we have. And we look at all of the projects that will have to be completed there as it relates to capacity and growth in order to get to that capacity. And then we divide the cost of all those projects divided by the amount of capacity that is remaining. And then we boil that down into what a equivalent residential unit uses for water per day. And that's how we charge a connection fee. And so when we look to charge, you could say in some regards that the fees that are in place today are set to recover anything that may have been needed in the past, and also to pay for the projects anticipated in the future. And so it's not like we're trying to catch up in regards to those projects. We're looking at those from this new setting of here's where it is today, and every new home going forward will need to pay this amount or the number of fixture units. As it relates to the fixture units question, I think if we look into, I think it's probably time that we do look at going and doing another study based on water usage, because you could have a 6,000 square foot home and have a widow living there. And so I think if we were looking at something based on water usage, it might be more closely related to the to that impact of the users that are there. But I do think that that's something we should be looking at.
Ask one follow-up.
Please.
As your graph showed, you guys are kind of blindsided by construction costs since COVID. That is continuing to go up, okay? Has that changed your connection fee pricing structure? Because that's only been the last couple of years.
So when One of the things that we did during that gap between 2021 and 2023, the end of 2021 when the study came out, and then through 2022, we actually ended up going back because we were starting to see those increases going up and adjusted those costs. We put another inflationary factor that was higher than what the original report recorded. Since then, we are looking at those connection fees again now. And I think that there's probably still some additional room that's gonna have to be captured. So we're reviewing those costs as well. But great question, Scott. Thank you. Questions? All right, appreciate that. Daniel, do we have anybody online that has a question? If anybody online has a question and would like to let's see, raise their hand. Is that what they want to do? So raise your hand and Daniel will admit you into the room and have you unmute, state your name, your full name, and ask your question.
Hello. Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Excellent. My name is Max. I'm a resident here in the city of Reno. Earlier in this presentation, you stated that all developers pay sewer connection fees.
That is correct.
I want to ask why you say that when in the last 5 years there have been over $5 million in sewer connection fee waivers or deferments given to developers?
Max, that's a great question. Yes, there were connection fee waivers given to affordable housing. There was state legislature approved the process to allow that to occur, and through policy decision that did happen. So yes, there has been some waivers of connection fees for some affordable housing units that have gone in. So that is correct in regards to the affordable housing. That would be an exception. So you are correct.
Okay, so then how about Jacobs Entertainment, who is worth hundreds of millions of dollars and got $1.5 million in sewer credits and a 10-year extension on those sewer credits, which is double the normal extension, and he built no affordable housing.
So again, part of when that development agreement came to city council, these are sewer connection credits. So sewer connection credits are sewer fixture units tied to, say, an older motel that was torn down, or an apartment complex, or something that was demolished. And then the developer is given a certain time frame in order to use those credits to build in whatever they're going to build, so they can offset some of their costs of sewer connection credits through that. So Jacobs did get, they listed and codified in the development agreement the dollar amount of the credits and the time frame of 10 years. So that was a one-off development agreement that occurred for the Jacobs properties. It was not free money, if you will. Again, the owner and the properties that were purchased by Jacobs did pay for those fixture units, the number of drains, the number of toilets, sinks, if there was a dishwasher or a washing machine hookup or all those things, they did pay for those. And the Jacobs agreement just allowed Jacobs to use those and give them additional 5 years in time to use them.
Right, 5 years is the standard. However, they were given an additional 10 years. And I would understand that line of reasoning if it wasn't also understood that Jacobs Entertainment is likely to expand on those properties and far exceed the expected fixtures that already exist there by tearing down the previous properties, building up new properties in its place. The issue that I have with that is they were given 10 years to use those credits, which is, like I had mentioned previously, double the normal amount of time. We are given a 16.6% cumulative increase in our sewer rates over the next 2 years to offset what seems like a very extreme handout to wealthy developers, Vintage Housing and Green Street, Reno Housing Authority's Sutro project, Jacobs Entertainment, and that's just what's been made public. Who knows what's been private?
And Max, I would also say, let's say that Jacobs has a development that's going to require so many fixture units, and the cost of the sewer connection is going to be $1.5 million. They are going to use some of those sewer credits, whatever, for that portion of it to help offset that, but it isn't going to pay it all. They have to pay, if they had 300 fixture units designated for a property and their new development was going to use 800, they're going to have to pay the difference of the 500 fixture units and the cost that goes into that to the fund. So it's not like they're getting a free ride on whatever they develop.
But they're getting a significant discount that a normal person like myself, who's just a school bus driver for the county and not some wealthy developer, a discount that I myself would not be able to get. It would be more understandable if he was actually building affordable housing, but we both know that he's not. So no, this rate hike isn't about infrastructure costs. It's about plugging the hole left by favors to wealthy developers. And now you're turning around and passing the bill on to working families. Wages in Reno have only rose 7.5% over the last 3 years. Inflation alone wiped that out with a 15% increase. Rent is over $1,500 a month on average. Homes are pushing $600,000, a 50% increase in 2024. People still can't afford eggs, and you're trying to get us to pay an additional 16% of our wages that just doesn't exist anymore. So no, this proposal sends a clear message. If you're a developer, you get deals. If you're a resident, you get the tab. That's not leadership. That's not equity. That's economic betrayal.
Max, I understand your point of view, where you're coming from. I respectfully disagree, though, in terms of where those credits come from and how they're being used. They're certainly, the developer made an agreement for that 10 years, but they are only recouping the value of the fixture units that had been paid on previously to go towards the new development. And yes, to your point, it does go out for additional 5 years to the 10 years.
I appreciate your time. Look, I'm not asking you to stop fixing pipes. I'm not asking you to stop. I'm just asking you to stop pretending that this is fair, because we need to audit the developer fee exemptions. We need to halt the hikes, and we need to fix this imbalance before we try to pass on any of this toward the residents that are already struggling. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Max. Daniel, do we have anybody else online? Thank you. Iris, can you unmute?
Yes, do you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. Iris Jaley Papard, the Executive Director for One Truckee River. My comments are my own, with our mission in mind to ensure a healthy and thriving and sustainable river connected to the hearts and minds of its community. I can see how difficult this is. Coming to this, I've learned more. And I do agree that developers should be charged the maximum they can because they're coming in new, and residents that are here need to be supported. I totally agree with breaking down a fee determined by water usage. And I just want to speak on the risk of failure, because from my understanding, the risk of failure could mean really detrimental things to the Truckee River. And on that note, I wonder if there's calculations, if a failure is to take place, what does that mean to our water quality? What does that mean for what the government needs to pay to fix if those things were to happen in the future?
So Iris, I'm going to speak from experience from 2012, 2013. We had just put in place the rate increase that went into effect October 1st, 2011. We knew that we had some outsized risk at the wastewater treatment plant, Truckee Meadows Water Reclamation Facility. And specifically, we had 2 projects under design. One of those projects was the headworks. The headworks is where all the sewage comes into the plant. So it comes into the plant, it gets screened for anything that might be in there that's carrying that would cause problems for the plant. And then the water and sewage goes through and is pumped up into start the process. We had a valve that was stuck open. We couldn't close it. And because of that, we had a risk of our headworks failing. We had to set up in a very short period of time, matter of a couple days, a bypass pumping system. So you can imagine when I talk about 25 million gallons of sewage created by the city of Reno, and then you add on what City of Sparks, and then back in those days, it's probably, instead of 6 football fields, it's probably like 8 football fields total because of less sewage from Reno, but they added sewage from Sparks. And we had to set up and bypass pump that from manholes up and through the plant and up into where it would go to start the process. And that was some very scary times. We had, imagine putting some major beams across Steamboat Creek so that we could support pipes that were up out of the ground that were supporting the weight of the sewage that was being pumped across Steamboat Creek to go into the plant to be treated. So when you talk about the risk of failure, had we had a failure in those pipes, that sewage would have come out of the manholes and would have gone into Steamboat Creek and directly into the Truckee. That can result into large fines from Nevada Division of Environmental Protection and EPA that we would then be responsible to pay for. We would have obviously the critical action plans, make sure that we're doing all that we could to prevent that and make the repairs as quickly as possible and whatever those costs are involved. So, when I talk about the failure and the risk of it, it could take a lot of different looks. I can speak to that one specifically because I lived it. So thank you for your question.
Yeah. And I just want to speak to the complexity of this because I think a lot of the credits that are given are the decision of the council, where I see the staff responsible for taking care of things that need to be taken care of with limited budget. So I want to express the message that the council, do everything they can on their end to make sure that you guys have the money you need to do what you need to do with being equitable to the community.
Thank you, Iris.
Yeah, thank you.
Daniel, do we have anyone else with a question? We do not. Oh. Yes, no? Iris, your hand is up.
Sorry, I just sorry, mistake.
No worries. Do we have any other questions in the audience? Thank you. Thank you for coming to the meeting. Thank you for being engaged in this. We wouldn't hold this meeting if we didn't actually want the feedback. That's why we set the survey up. We want to make it as easy as we could to get the feedback so we can bring that back. And you saw a lot of the questions that have already been asked and the theme of those questions. So we appreciate that. Thank you for your time.
Thanks.